Okay, welcome back, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions. It's Thursday, March 12th. We are looking at House 419, House Bill 410, which is in House Judiciary Committee. But they are looking at a piece that pertains a little bit to corrections, which is the definition of recidivism, which currently is in 28 VSA, which is the state statute title that pertains to corrections. So the definition itself is being changed, and the placement of where that definition is changing to Title 13, which is your criminal justice title. Doesn't deal with corrections in that title. So we have Michelle Childs with us, who is legislative counsel. So Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you if you could introduce yourself.
Good morning. So for the record, Michelle Childs, Office of Legislative Counsel. And the chair gave you a great little synopsis of what's going on with this proposal. And if you'll recall, I think I was here
weeks ago,
2 or 3. I don't know, it's all starting to blur together at this point, but we talked a little bit about the existing definition in Title 28 of recidivism, how that was adopted a number of years ago prior to Justice Reinvestment 1. And it was a definition that was being used by some other states. In working with CSG, Vermont decided to adopt that definition, but it's a rather complicated and clunky one. And I think I know House Judiciary has heard testimony. I believe you've heard some testimony. It's not something necessarily that folks are really using. And so I think there's been a strong interest in having a more flexible definition and one that is easier for people to understand and to use, and that will be more helpful in getting you the data that you need. And so what House Judiciary decided to do is they are basically creating a new chapter in Title 13. So Title 13 is Crimes and Criminal Procedure. And so they're creating a new chapter there where we can start to put all of these types of study and data collection, all that stuff, because it's kind of a little scattered through the statute. So you have some things that are in Title 20 in your public safety title. You have that, you have a little bit in Title 28. And the idea is that maybe we're going to start to kind of pull everything together, make sure there's not unnecessary overlap in some of the studies and analysis, and really kind of help you target where, the information that you want. And so the House Judiciary Committee has been working with CRG on the language. So they've been partners with the committee on that and have signed off on this.
CRG is
the Crime Research Group. I know you've had probably Monica and Robin in before, and they are the real, you're now, but probably watching. They are the experts on that. So if you look at this and have questions about certain types of studies or how they do that, you're going to probably have to ask them about that kind of stuff. But I'll review the language with you, and I'll share my screen. Okay, so you can see this is a strike-all amendment to H 410. And as I mentioned, so Section 1 is just creating a new chapter in Title 13, where we're going to start to have all these different statutes relating to assessing criminology measures. And so the first thing in there, and we've only got one definition so far in this chapter, and you'll see it's a new definition of recidivism. And so here it says that recidivism means a relapse into criminal activity as evidenced by an individual who was convicted for a criminal offense after receiving a criminal conviction for a previous crime. So it's a much more kind of plain language, simpler definition than the one that exists currently in Title 28. And it's kind of like what you think of, which is like you've been convicted once and then you're convicted again, right? So the next sentence is talking about how you calculate. So the date of the recidivism event is the date of arraignment for the subsequent offense. So when they're going to look at that and how they track that, because you think, it may be, there's not an easy way for them to look necessarily at when they're doing the data compilation of the date of offense. but it's easy for them to look at the record and see the arraignment date. So the arraignment date is the first time that the defendant appears before a court, and there has to be a finding of probable cause for the case to continue. But it has to be conviction and a conviction, right? But that point, that date, because you're going to term it, because you're going to say from, what was a 3-year or a 5-year or something like that, right? They're going to use the arraignment date.
That's when the clock starts.
Yeah. Well, you have the conviction.
You gotta have the conviction.
You have the conviction, right? And then the clock starts. And let's say if you're looking and saying it's a 3-year look, so here's a conviction on January 1st, 2020. So if there's an arraignment and probable cause is found for a subsequent offense and it's within 3 years, then it will qualify.
So it's the arraignment of that second conviction that
Exactly.
kicks in based on when that first conviction is.
But it's after release for that first conviction.
We're not there yet.
Well, okay. I wanted to.
So I want to be clear so people understand. Okay. So someone's been convicted of a criminal offense. Okay. They're on probation.
Mm-hmm.
They're on probation. They have a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Conditions of release in that probation. And one of those conditions is they it's supposed to be in by a certain time in the evening, by 11 o'clock. Okay. They haven't made that curfew. It's a violation of a condition of release. Is that violation something they would go to an arraignment for to be convicted of a criminal?
Not unless it's a new crime.
No, it's not a new crime. It's a condition of release.
Mm-hmm.
One of the conditions of the person being on probation, they just are violating the condition of meeting curfew. They're not creating anything. They're just violating that condition.
Right.
And they're cited for that.
Right. No, there has to be 2 convictions. So that's the first thing you need, right? You have to be convicted once, convicted a subsequent second time. Okay. The point that for the first offense, when the clock is going to start ticking, is, as Representative Hedrick mentioned, you'll see the highlighted language, and that's the new language that judiciary, they've looked at all of this, but this is something that they haven't seen yet. And that's for the clock starts is the date that an individual is released from incarceration. So on that first conviction, if they're sentenced to an incarcerative setting, let's say serve a year, right? That date that they're released, then the clock starts to tick, right? Or if on the date that they're convicted, they're sentenced to probation. So it's not an incarcerative sentence. That starts from the time that they are sentenced to that probationary period. Okay, so that's when the clock starts. Then they're going along and they are subsequently convicted of another crime. And then they would measure not to the date of the second conviction. They would measure to the date of the arraignment for that second conviction.
So what I'm trying to get at is there's some confusion in this committee at times that when there's a condition of release, that could be calculated as recidivism. And conditions of release are conditions that are set by the court. And it's not always a criminal activity when they violate a condition of release, correct?
Correct.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Mhm.
There's some confusion.
So this definition is just for purposes here. And know that you can always be using different parameters for requesting a study or requesting information from CRG or putting something in here and say, for these purposes, we want this kind of information around folks who are violating conditions, right? But for purposes here, we're talking about convictions for criminal offenses. So recidivism is just going to be, you have been convicted at least twice.
So Kevin, you had your hand up before I interrupted everything.
Oh, I got it now.
Got it? Because the conditions of release is what people were.
Yeah.
So it's a new conviction, a new crime.
Yep.
But not necessarily the same crime. It could be any crime.
Correct.
Right.
Yep. So next section in this new chapter, this is requiring some annual reports that are going to look probably familiar to you. I think what it was, Act 140 from a couple years ago when you did some justice reinvestment work. So in this new section, it's requiring some annual reports annually. So it's going to be every year. What you have, I think, in Title 28 on the justice reinvestment is every 3 years, and you had one in December in 2024.
We don't remember any of those.
Right, okay. Well, these are going to be, these will be every year, every spring. The Vermont Statistical Analysis Center, which for Vermont's version of that is CRG, so it's Robin and Monica, shall submit the following reports to the House and Senate Committees on Judiciary, Committee on Corrections and Institutions, and Senate Committee on Institutions. And then there's a few on page 2 that are specifically designated to just kind of get the ball rolling and start. And the chair and House Judiciary thinks, you know, we're going to kind of build on this as we kind of assess what kind of information y'all need to be doing your work. The first one is bail rates. And so that is an annualized report on bail rates, including hold without bail, monetary amounts, and bail posting information aggregated by county. And the report shall include data on pretrial detainees held in Vermont correctional facilities, including the crime type and jurisdiction for which they are held. The second one is on
That I would really encourage that we do, because that is very, very important information. Because a lot of folks feel that the bail amounts are too high, that people can't afford the bail. And it's just really good information to know the breakdown of folks who are detainees, who are being held without bail, and those monetary amounts, because they're not, it's a different, when you look at that data, you walk away with a different impression of what's going on.
So the next one is on recidivism. So a report on the annual recidivism rate using that new definition. So we're only talking about convictions, that measures individuals who are convicted of a criminal offense after receiving a criminal conviction for a previous crime. And then here, the recidivism rate shall be calculated using a 3 and a 5 year kind of look back. Okay, so those are the periods they're going to take a look at.
So what's the difference between a 3-year look back and a 5-year look back? What,
Matt.
is it just data? I know it's 2 years.
You're out of form.
They're math and public.
That's your boy up there. Out of control.
What's the intent of that?
You would have to ask CRG. I will say that is in, I'd have to look if that's in the Title 28, but that came from CRG. So I think that is a standard measure that they use. As to why they use that, I don't know.
Because in the way we already have it,
Could I ask the question a different way?
yeah, it's a 3-year cycle that we have.
If you reoffend 6 years after your initial arraignment,
Conviction, yep.
then you wouldn't be.
You wouldn't be captured in that
You wouldn't
data,
be considered a
Recidivist.
in that particular report. Yep.
drop off. They,
Mhm.
we no longer consider that yeah.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing. We want to know 3, we want to know 5, but after that, we don't care.
I don't know that
I would say we don't care.
Well, if you don't get the data, you obviously don't care. I mean, if you want to know 10, well, I understand what you're saying, but we're saying we've watched long enough. If there's a reoffense, how else would you capture that? What I'm saying.
Understand.
That's a question.
Well, you're looking at the rate of recidivism. You're not saying the person didn't recidivate or create a new crime. You're just looking at the rate of recidivism.
And-
That's what you're looking at. It's a
Right.
recidivism rate.
Mhm.
You're not saying that that person is not recidivate, didn't create another crime. It's not what that language is saying. It's talking about the rate. Do we have a 30% rate of recidivism?
Within a certain period of time.
Right,
Right,
during a
and it-
certain period of time.
I
But
will-
is that period of time a 3-year cycle or a 5-year cycle? That's what that looks confusing to me.
And for that, I would say just you need to talk with CRG if about understanding, or I can shoot them an email, or they're probably listening and will shoot me an answer.
So is that
As to why.
clearer in terms of the calculations of what it's used for or not? Kevin?
It's clear to me. I'm just trying to explain why 3 and 5, but it's not 3, 5, and 7. After 5 years, if you reoffend, we're not publishing that information. Is that another way to say it?
Yeah. I'm not down the hall, and so it would be hard for me to explain what I think it means, but like if you reoffend like 10 years later, it's probably not necessarily connected to the original or any rehabilitation you've had in the facility. It just after you get so far out, the causality or the whatever doesn't seem to be there. I don't think it's a matter of not caring, it's whether or not it's relevant to this specific thing. And that's all I was trying to
The reason
say.
I use the word care is if you care, you're asking for the information, but we're not asking for the information after 5 years.
Well, but I would draw a distinction, like it's which data are valuable, and somebody somewhere decided that 3 and 5 is valuable, or maybe 10 doesn't tell you something. I don't think that's not caring. I think it's saying that's not valuable in the same way.
Different way of saying
It's
it.
not as
It's not applicable.
But let me throw in a curveball to
Uh-oh.
Michelle. So a person's been convicted of a crime. 6 years later, they're convicted of another crime. Court records, unless it's been expunged, because I don't want to get.
There's no more expungement.
Yeah, well.
Oh, really?
Except
The
for
court
deferred.
record knows that there has been a previous sentence.
Yeah, there's no, it's all public information. It's all out there. There's nothing that if you subsequently wanted to ask CRG for information and say, I want a 10-year look back for whatever purposes, there's nothing preventing you from doing that. This is talking about just in the context of the annual reports. What has been advised is my understanding from the experts that work with the data is that the information that's most valuable, that tells you the information you need around recidivism, what is working, what's not working,
Right.
is a 3 to 5 year look back. And then once you get past a certain point, if someone has gone beyond 5 years and not recidivated, then it is less valuable knowing that. And also the the instances of recidivism really drops significantly as well. The longer someone goes with not having committed a subsequent offense.
Yeah.
Other questions? Anything else? Other questions? Okay. Michelle?
The next one is arrests and clearance rates. So an annualized report on arrests and clearance rates. Arrests are to be organized by crime according to data from NIBRS.
Well, I'm not sure that's relevant, but what's organized by crime? Like how specific is that, I guess? Is that by like category or by?
By NIBRS does it a little, it's not like using the Vermont one. They kind of, if you look at some of the CRG information and probably some of the reports that you got last year from CRG on some of these things that are in Title 28, it's kind of like, it's not like groupings like theft, or sexually based offenses. It's not that big,
Yeah.
but there are certain groupings and certain offenses. And then our offenses would fall into certain categories.
Okay.
But that's the data they have to use, and
Yeah.
so they based on that.
Yeah.
Mhm. The next one is most convicted crimes. So it'd be a report detailing aggregated information on the number, type, and length of sentences, including fines, for the 20 crimes with the highest number of convictions. And so CRG has a list of those, the crimes that are most often charged across the state and result in convictions. And so they'd be looking at kind of, we were trying to figure out the right way to say it because they were first calling it kind of, these are the top 20 crimes. And it sounded like it was, I don't know, something on Family Feud or something. And I was trying to figure out how do you say that? Like I knew what they meant, but this is essentially the 20 crimes that are really most prevalent that you see across the state. And then a report detailing the total combined years of probation and incarceration sentenced by the court in the prior year for those most convicted crimes. The report is to include, and then moving on to page 3, an analysis of which crimes and counties contributed most significantly to the sentences imposed. And so, this has been, they're trying to make sure that they show the data in a way, and as long as I've been here, there's always been this real focus on, we want to, kind of a more unified system of justice so that if you commit a certain offense in Bennington or you commit it in Burlington or you commit it in Barry, you're not getting vastly disproportionate sentences in that case. And so you
Geographic justice.
exactly, yeah.
Been trying to do that for 30 years.
Yeah, I think you guys have come a long way on that from the 90s, from what I remember.
Yep.
Subsection B on demographic variables, the information required shall include race, gender, age, and other demographic availables whenever possible. C is just saying that, anybody who has data, that CRG needs that data to basically be, producing these annual reports, shall provide that information to CRG. So they are to cooperate in getting them the information that they need. So section 2 is the repeal of the current definition of recidivism in Title 28. So you can just look at, and I know you guys have seen this, but if you think about what your new definition is, which is like you've been convicted once and then you're convicted again. Right now, it's you calculate based upon offenders who are sentenced to more than 1 year of incarceration who, after release from incarceration, return to prison within 3 years for a conviction for a new offense or a violation of supervision, resulting in the new incarcerative sentence or time served of at least 90 days. So there's a lot of variables in there. It's very, very specific, which means, like with the new definition, you're going to get a much broader snapshot of what's going on in the criminal justice system.
When we do this, when we move a definition from 28 to 13, we'll make sure that any references in existing statute are also changed.
That would be me.
Okay, you have to do that in this bill.
I took a look at it and it doesn't really appear much. I do have a list and it was only, you'll see, and then that takes me actually to
Oh, did I?
the next section, which is section 3, which is in Title 28, section 125. And this is on your criminal justice trends report on your every 3 years is we've taken the recidivism definition that cross-references it out, and as well as the 3-year recidivism rate report, because you're going to be getting this more detailed annual report. That's okay.
It's already there.
That's okay. And then there's a couple other instances of where the word recidivism appears, but one is in your pretrial supervision statute, which is going away. And then the other one is, I'm just trying to make, I think like in some of the juvenile justice statutes, but it's used as a, not this, it's not tied to this definition. Do you know what I mean? It's just a general thing about trying to, reduce or eliminate, recidivism amongst youthful offenders.
But where the statute is now, it rests in DOC, and it's the Department of DOC that calculates it.
Yes.
So it's really for the use within the DOC's world per se.
Right. And there's nothing that if you repeal this stops them from deciding they want to, if they find that that's valuable to producing data, that stops them from doing that.
So for the current definition of the recidivism, it's DOC that calculates the rate of that.
Mhm.
Is that used anywhere else besides in corrections world?
I don't know. You'd have to ask DOC.
I'm not sure. I mean, it's publicly available on our website, but the thing that I will note is that due to the current definition, it is somewhat limiting to use. And so we often don't refer to recidivism as a measure in which we make our decisions by, because we do collect so much other data, and the measure of recidivism is so delayed, so that by the time it comes out, we're probably well into the tenure of the next commissioner, seeing as the average tenure of a commissioner is only 24 months nationally. So we do support the change, as well as the conversations with the crime research group around their calculation of it in the future.
So by moving it out of the DOC statutes, really puts it more into the bigger world. And for use more in the bigger world, whereas being just in corrections is more insulated within corrections. And then out in the public, we use the word recidivism, but the definition doesn't rest in a place in statute that is really out there for public use. It's more insulated within DOC.
I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding. The old definition, you had to have been sentenced for at least a year.
Mhm.
So the question, I'd be curious, is how often is someone sentenced for less than a year? Often? Rarely?
I have to pull that information from our offender management system. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah.
But
It's,
Yeah.
it's a curiosity. I'm personally, I like the change that we took that out of there, because if someone offends and they're out in 10 months and they reoffend, I think we need to understand that rather than, so I'm happy with the change. I just was curious as to how often someone is actually convicted and goes for 11 months.
Well,
It would be an important.
that
We're gonna
has,
get that information in these.
I know,
reports.
I'm applauding it, is what I'm saying. I want to make sure I'm reading it right, because I think this is great.
okay, it would be sentenced to more than 1 year of incarceration. Doesn't mean
Not necessarily served.
not necessarily served, because they could be detained for that 1 year, but they haven't been sentenced. And then they get a sentence for a year and they're out on that day, because they've already served time.
But it's
but
still,
Yes,
to your point, it's still a very narrow definition.
Yeah. Right.
very narrow. And sentenced, it's only to incarceration. And I mean, that it would be such a minor misdemeanor that we don't do that anymore, really.
So the next section, section 4, is your appropriations section. So for FY 27, you'll see the monies that will be appropriated for the different studies. So $10,000 for the annual bail rate report, $10,000 for the annual recidivism report, $1,000 for the annual arrest and clearance rates, and subdivision 4, $4,000 for the annual sentencing reports. And then it would take effect this July.
So we're just getting update. It's not something we have to take formal action on, but I think it would be good just for the recidivism definition to just get a barometer. Temperature check. Are people feeling better about this particular definition? I think one thing that really clarified it was when the clock started ticking, because we had concerns earlier that, well, if the person is serving 5 years, is it beyond that time of calculating the rate? When does the clock really start? And that seems to have been clarified. For that. Any questions? Anything?
One more and I'll stop.
Yeah, go ahead.
The fact that it's underlined appropriated from the general funds, these figures, 10,000, 10,000, 1,000, et cetera, we haven't had an appropriation in past years for the current.
Well, this is for the work for
CRG.
CRG, them to do the work. And usually if we're asking them to do some extra work, we try to pay them.
Right, so the current one, the way that it's working, as the chair had mentioned before, was something that DOC, when they're doing, because they're already tasked with doing reports and collecting data and sharing that with policymakers. So that's just about telling them how to do the calculation. This new one is like an annual an annual report that they would be doing, that we would, generally, the state is contracting with them to do that.
So are we spending this appropriation every year, or this is a one-time?
It's not a one-time, this is for FY 27.
Right.
So will the 25,000 also be required in FY 28?
I mean, I would assume,
Because it's an
so,
ongoing.
right, it's an ongoing
You're
report,
paying
so.
them to do the work.
Yes, but I don't
Contracting
wanna-
out with a crime research
That's my
group.
point. So is there 25,000 coming out of someplace else, or is this
Well,
just over?
It's in appropriations committee and it would be, I don't know whose budget that would.
Right, I mean, I think, so House Judiciary received the numbers from CRG of what it would cost to do those reports. As the chair mentioned, once it's voted out of House Judiciary, it's going to go to appropriations. Appropriations will consider it. They may decide to add some of the language you've seen maybe in some other bills that says, you know, upon available funds, or they may change it from the general fund to something else, or, you know, but that's all to be seen.
And it will be an ongoing expense.
Right.
Well, hopefully this amount is coming out of someplace else. So we don't, whatever.
It's part of the general fund budget. That's where it is. It's all part of the general fund budget. It's up to appropriations to see where the money comes from. I mean, we can't say here it's gonna come from an entity in the Agency of Human Services that's gonna lose 25,000. It's gonna go over here.
Right, and that's why judiciary, you know, hasn't spent a lot of time in this section, because they know it's really, you know, the work of House Appropriations to make those determinations. They just wanted to get the numbers from CRG of what would be needed. And then it'll be up to appropriations, whether to agree or strike this section or use contingent funds language.
Anything else? So I think it's pretty positive in terms of the new definition for recidivism, correct, for the committee?
Yes.
So you could relay that for whatever it's worth.
I'm sure they'll be pleased.
Yeah.
Kevin may have some questions on the floor.
Let's leave that.
JFO is gonna be there too.
You guys forbear me for my education. I wouldn't do that out there.
You can do it in a small group. So let's take a lunch break. We are back here at 1 o'clock. We have one bill left that we're working on, 550, gender equity within our correctional facilities. So we'll be back at 1.